Hey art fiends, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm finally jumping back into critiquing the characters that you guys have sent to me. If you are unfamiliar with these videos, be sure to go check out all the others that I have made so far. As usual, I will be talking about 3 characters that I have been sent from the creators themselves. This means I have direct permission to give feedback on these characters. These videos are never meant to attack anyone in any way. I will be giving critique, meaning I give advice based on my knowledge from my many years of experience and that stupid BFA that I have. If something I say does not end up being what you were looking for, that is okay. You don't have to listen to a single thing I say if you don't want to. But hopefully, at least some part of my feedback will resonate with you, and maybe it will help push yourself with the characters you design in the future. This applies even if I'm talking about someone else's work. Maybe something I say about a character here will help you with your own creations. If you do want one of your characters in a future video, be sure to join my Discord server. The link is in the description, and there's a special channel just for this exact thing. When you submit, please include a 3 to 5 sentence description of the character and their world. Do not write an entire novel. Please keep it short and sweet. I will most likely not talk about your character if you have me deciphering an essay. So why don't we just jump right into the first character of this video. First up is a character sent in by user CorruptGF. This character's name is Cassie Kimaru. She is a positive free spirit who also enjoys a bit of drama. She's good at keeping her cool in tough situations. Her story revolves around her being transported into a fairy tale dimension. So far, she has been laying low, but she is very curious about the world around her. Looking at the design and comparing it to the description, I had a couple ideas already floating around in my head on how to help convey the things stated a little bit better. I love the addition of roller skates. They're such a fun and unique idea to have on a character. However, I could see some problems developing with her wearing these in a fairy tale world. Most likely there won't be a lot of paved roads, and instead she would be trekking through woods or stone paths. The wheels on her feet would make it extremely difficult for her to even walk on that kind of terrain. So instead of going full roller skates, I thought a fun thing would be to give her heelys. This way she could still have wheels, but also be able to walk normally when she needed to. The next thing that stood out to me was the colors. For someone who is supposed to have a positive free spirit personality, she's wearing a lot of dark colors. When I think of a positive person, I don't think of blacks and grays at all. The last thing I really wanted to incorporate was some kind of huge cape. Her story says that she has been laying low in this fairy tale world, but how can she be if she's wearing such out-of-place clothes so publicly? Since I don't want to just change her outfit to be completely fantasy out of nowhere, we can instead give her a big cloak that she can hide her modern day clothes under. This will help her blend into the world a lot better. To help me with all of this, I collected a bunch of references of these fantasy characters with big cloaks. It was now time to sketch an updated character with all these things in mind. I started by planning a pose. The pose in the original drawing is very stiff and boring. She's free-spirited, and I wanted to show that with how I positioned her. I also really wanted her skates to play a part in how I position her. It took a lot of attempts and many references for me to finally get the legs placed in an accurate position for someone using heelys. In order to be able to show her facial features, I wanted to have her pulling off a hood from her head that is attached to the cloak that I will add later. When I went into forming the body, I continued to make a few changes to where I wanted to place the arms, as well as the facial expression I wanted her to have. When I was satisfied with the body, I went on to the design elements. The hair I kept the same, since there was no standout reason to change it in any way. For the clothes, however, I needed to add in my large cloak idea, so I drew out the flowing fabric, making sure that it was in motion since she was mid-skate. I included a hood that she can put over her head to hide when needed. As for the rest of the clothes, sticking with the simple sweater pants combo seemed pretty fine. She was supposed to look like she was from the modern era, so there was no reason to change any of this. I did enjoy the knee pads a lot, another very unique idea. They are also definitely something that would stand out a lot in this fairy tale world. I ended up keeping them in my update as well. Her shoes were now heelys, so I made sure to give them the accurate number of wheels and in the correct location. With the new design finished, it was time to start thinking about colors. Her hair, skin, and eyes I took directly from the original color palette. The biggest thing that stood out to me was her clothing colors, not so much her body colors. I wanted to stick in the same general area as the old colors, but brighten them up to show her personality better. Starting with the shoes, I first tried the bright red from their old colors, but it was a bit too saturated for me. I then decided to swap it to a light peach color. This to relate it to the white of the original shoes, but also to add a bit of color into it. I then moved to the knee pads. I used the darker red from the original, and I ended up not changing it since it worked really well. Moving to the sweater, I decided to use the same peach as the shoes here. Something I say a lot is that if you're going to include a color, try and find multiple places to have it so that the design feels more unified. This also helps prevent you from having hundreds of colors in your final color palette. At this point, I started checking the colors I was choosing in grayscale. I do this to help see if any of the colors are too similar in tone when they are made gray. You want to make sure that your colors stand out from one another when grayscaled. This helps prevent your entire drawing from looking flat and blending together. What a color looks like in grayscale may not be as dark as you think it might be when you see the colors, so it's always a good idea to check. I noticed the peach was too similar to the skin color, so I darkened it a bit to help it stand out. It was then cloak time. The first color I picked was one of the dark grays from the original. I found it to be almost the exact same color as the hair, making it impossible to differentiate between the two, so I lightened it up to help combat this. I actually end up turning it more blue than gray, helping the color feel like it belongs with the blue of her hair. I used this same color for half of the knee pads as well, helping connect the colors together. For the pants, I began with the dark red from the original, but I saturated it so that the red color was a lot more noticeable. I added some final touches by giving the shoes a pattern similar to the original design, and that finished off the updated colors. So, after going through and shading it, this gave us the new version of Cassie. I definitely like the lighter colors on her, and honestly, it could maybe go even lighter than what I came up with here. It may be interesting if the cloak was super dark, but everything about this character was light, even things like the hair. But for now, hopefully this was a helpful look at the potential that this character has. The next character we will be taking a look at was submitted by user Lucy on board. This character is named Lucian. She is an echidna with telekinetic powers. She is apparently homicidal and annoying, but also generally nice. She has a sketchbook with the words imagination on it that she uses as a sort of picture diary. She enjoys pranks that involve bombs. The bandana that she wears is a family heirloom. So, wow, there's a lot of contradictory things being stated here about this character. She's apparently homicidal and annoying, but also kind, all at the same time. It feels like you're trying to push this edgy personality onto this character when everything about how you've designed it screams cute friend. That heart on her shirt being the biggest proponent in all of this. Not to mention her very bright color palette. So I decided I would focus on the nice part of the description, and that could play well with her liking pranks. It would make more sense if she was just very silly and enjoyed a good joke that can maybe border on dangerous, not literally enjoy committing murder. Not to mention that the facts included on your drawing push this more reserved prankster idea. The second big contradiction is the character design itself. If you never told me that she was an echidna, there is absolutely nothing about the design that would ever make me think that she is one. Honestly, she looks kind of like a bear with an alligator tail. So I made sure to use images of real echidnas to help figure out how we can get Lucian to look like the species that you are trying to make her be. Up first was the pose. Leaning into the introverted but kind aspect, I gave her a more reserved pose. I wanted to be sure to include her sketchbook and her telekinetic powers as well. So I made sure to include where she would be lifting the book with these powers. I have never drawn an echidna before, so I did some quick sketch studies to get a feel for how these animals work. The biggest thing is definitely their long snouts. So for my updated design, I gave Lucian a long snout of her own. The eyes of echidnas are small, but every time I tried to give her small eyes, it looked horrifying to me. So I stuck with the big cartoon eyes instead, which was a lot nicer to look at. The spines on an echidna is another really big defining feature. I also did not see it anywhere on the original design of this character. In order to make it feel like it was a part of the design in a feasible way, I decided to use spiky hair to emulate the look of spines. This also relates to the tufts of fur on the original design, but is a lot more connected to the actual species of animal. Posing the rest of the body, I gave her claws on her hands, since echidnas have these long, nail-like claws, and not so much cute paws like the original had. I finally added some spiked fur tufts on her arms and legs to help show that these spikes are occurring all over her body, and not just on her head alone. Echidnas also don't really have a tail, so I didn't include one at all in this design. With the body designed, it was time to give her clothes. The most important thing to include was the bandana around her neck, since it is so important to her story. Since I have no context for what time period or type of world this character lives in, I decided to keep all the clothes the same, since I had no reason to change anything. I added the pattern and writing on her shirt and sketchbook, and I finished my sketch of this new design. Moving to colors. I start as I usually do by taking the colors directly from the original character design. For this, I took that pink to fill her in. There was a dark gray color in the original that was used for the spikes on the tail, which I had thought would be a perfect color for the snout. Continuing taking colors from the original, I also used the white from the fur pattern for the new fur pattern. The placement of the pattern is where things began changing. Basing it off of the real echidna, the spines on their backs are a different color than the rest of their fur. Because of this, I decided to do a similar thing on Lucian's own spines. I added a white tip to each of the spines to show these color differences. I also used it for the eyebrows, as the original design had white eyebrows as well. Trying to find more uses for these colors, I then used the dark gray for the colors of the claws. I added a lighter gray to the tip of the snout to have a moment of variety in the design, as well as help that tip stand out more from the rest of the nose. The eyes were the same green that was in the original palette. I used the brown from the jacket as the color of the sketchbook, adding a little heart to the book to match with Lucian's shirt design. Moving into her clothes, the shirt and shorts worked well. Black and white always go well together. I ended up using the light gray that I used on the tip of the snout for the belt color. It was white in the original design, which made it indistinguishable from the shirt. Now, we will be moving on to the two colors that really bothered me in the original character design. That would be the bandana and the jacket. Starting with the bandana, the original was the exact same color as Lucian's fur. This meant there was nothing to separate the bandana from the entirety of Lucian's body. The bandana is supposed to be this important thing to Lucian. Why then would you use the same color as her fur for this object? It's the exact same thing as giving a human character a piece of clothing that is the same color as their skin. If we go farther into the grayscale test, there's obviously going to be zero differentiation between the bandana and Lucian's body. So changing that color was really important to help this design. I wanted to keep it pink, so I went with a much darker pink that pops on her design. It's the most saturated part of the design as well, which makes the viewer's eye zoom right to this object first when looking at this character. I used this new pink color for the hearts on her design as well, helping bring it all together and stopping the clothes from matching exactly with the body. I then added in the white stripe running down the center of the bandana. Now it was time to tackle my second biggest problem with the design, the brown of the jacket. As soon as I looked at that brown next to the pink of her fur, I hated it. I didn't even need to do the grayscale test to know that those colors looked horrible together. Just like when you make sure your clothes match when you get dressed in the morning, the clothes on your characters better match as well. Some people look better in greens, some better in reds, and Lucian definitely looks bad in browns. I tried to darken the brown at first, thinking maybe the problem would be solved if their tones were different enough. This did not solve the problem at all. I was actually making this drawing while at work, and I was extremely stuck on how I could go about fixing the jacket so it didn't look so muddy on her design. I asked some of my coworkers if they also were having issues with the brown, and all of them agreed that the brown was a bad choice next to the pink. I knew I didn't want to change the fur color since that was such an important part of the original design, so it had to be the jacket that changed. In my color tests, I came upon this light purple color that I immediately knew was the right choice. The lightness of this color worked really well over the light colors of her body. It fits with the saturation of the other colors as well. My coworkers also all agreed, so this color got the approval of 3 different art teachers besides just myself. Coming to an end, I added in the shading and created a glowing effect around the sketchbook to help show the telekinesis powers. This might be one of the biggest changes in a design that I have made in one of these videos. This is really because the character is supposed to be a very specific animal, and yet it looks nothing like the animal that it's supposed to be. I'm still very lost on the personality of this character. There definitely needs to be some revising on this aspect of the character. If you aren't able to tell a stranger everything about the character and their world in an elevator pitch, then you definitely need to take some time to simplify what you've created. We've made it to the last character in this video. This one was submitted by user Oswald. This character is named Edwin. He is the main antagonist in his story. He is very charismatic and doesn't feel much pain. He dyed his hair purple to make himself look different from his 4 brothers. He is 8 feet tall and 26 years old. Oswald is actually very active on my server, so I have seen this character many times before. Being familiar with the character helped a lot because I was very surprised by some of the things in the description. I had a vague idea he wasn't a good guy, but I had no idea that he was the main antagonist of the story. The biggest shock to me was his height and age. I would have never guessed that he was 26 years old. And then the fact that he's also 8 feet tall threw me for a loop. Showing age can be difficult, I get it, but if your character is supposed to be an adult and look like an adult, then the last thing you want is for people to misinterpret your character as a minor. Edwin is a very fancy man, and I love this about him. So for references, I collected a variety of images of different well-dressed villains from different media. Jumping into the pose, I knew there had to be a good way to show how charismatic yet evil this character is. I decided that having him noticeably tilting would make you really uneasy when looking at him. Since he is charismatic, I had his arms up and outstretched to show him motioning you to come closer to him. Going into the body design, this is where we can get that age and height noticeable on the character. The first thing is the eyes. I say so much about who a character is, and they can help show age in a character as well. Kids tend to have rounder heads and bigger eyes. As we get older, our heads grow, and therefore make our eyes look smaller on our head. I wanted this wide, crazy look for his eyes, so although I made them big, I was sure to sharpen the ends and add these bags under them to help show how unnatural they are. For the nose, I went for this big, pointed shape. Noses are more prominent on older people. Kids still have a lot of this baby fat that makes all their features look soft and small. Using sharp and long shapes can be an easy way to show age in a character. The final facial feature was the mouth, which I made into a huge, sharp grin. Facial expressions are the easiest way to convey a personality, and nothing about the original drawing's expression told me that this character was an evil guy. Now, the body shape was the next thing that needed to be changed based on what I had talked about earlier. In order to show that this guy was supposed to be 8 feet tall, his body needs to reflect that. If you've ever looked at someone who is extremely tall, you will notice that their limbs feel unnaturally long. They kind of look like you took a person of average height and then stretched them out. The body of the original character is super squat. If he's supposed to be 8 feet tall, I'm afraid to know what someone who's like 5'10" will look like standing next to him when he is drawn in this style. I made his body parts long and angular, showing his height effectively, and also adding to the dangerous feeling. His whole style from the original drawing makes me feel like he is more of the calculating businessman villain type, less so the aggressive head-on fighting type, so giving him a lanky and pointing body helps enforce this idea. With the body done, it was time to dress him up. I'm liking the aesthetic of his outfit, but it feels as though it is lacking in being interesting to look at. These types of villains are usually sharply dressed and well put together. The original drawing feels like it was teetering right on the edge, but was too afraid to take that jump off. I started with the hair, trying to refine it into something less messy. It feels less like he styled his hair and more like he just drew random lines in different directions in the original design. So to bring it all together, I gave him a middle part with hair that is a lot more well-groomed. He is supposed to be this sharply dressed guy. The way he styles his hair would reflect how much he cares about his appearance. A lot of the references I found had characters in full suits, and that wasn't really what was happening with Edwin's design. I didn't want to move away from the vest since it was very unique to him. Instead, I added some style to the vest to really show that it is a vest and not just a strange shirt. I added a large collar to help shape the vest, as well as made sure to include the line where the vest closes. Now that he is looking his height, That means there was a lot more room on his body to put more buttons. I ended up with 4 buttons going down the center, since having any less felt as though it was uneven and missing something. Next was the cravat, another unique element to his design. Loving the idea, I only updated it to make it feel more like an actual cravat. I added a second layer to enhance the shape. Now, in the original drawing, it is very unclear exactly how this cravat is attached to his neck. It is the same color as what looks to be a collar, but that color doesn't match the color of the rest of the shirt, so maybe it could just be part of the cravat as well? But that wouldn't make sense since you don't tie a cravat like a neckerchief around your neck. So in my version, I added a distinguishable collar that the cravat can be tied under. Keeping up the dress suit look, I stuck with the long, slim pants. However, I made sure to distinguish between where the pants end and the shoes begin. To help dress him up, I made the shoes have a small heel, turning them into more of a dress shoe than, say, a sneaker. Finally, I added the cuffs to the ends of his arms where his undershirt will end. I actually almost gave him a top hat when going through this design, since I ended up being mostly inspired by Bram Stoker's Dracula, who has a top hat himself. I stopped myself from doing this only because I know Oswald's work and they have another character that they draw a lot that already has a top hat. So to not have every single one of your characters have a top hat, I decided to leave it out. But know that he would definitely look rad with one. With everything drawn out, it was finally time for colors. Honestly, there's not that much I did with the colors that changed anything drastically from the original. As I always do, I start with coloring things with the colors in the original palette. The first small change I made was making the skin even paler, to the point where his skin is almost pure white. Making his skin almost lifeless helps to push the idea that he is emotionless and should not be trusted. His eyes didn't show any distinct color outside of the lines, so I kept them black to match. Saving the hair for last, the clothes were next. Starting with the vest, I used a darker blue than the original had. It wasn't a drastic change, but it was different enough in order to help the blue stand out against the rest of the colors. I stuck with white for the undershirt, liking how that looked. For the pants, I went for an even darker black than the original. The gray tone of the old color was way too similar to that of the blue vest, and having it be almost pure black really helps with the antagonist angle. I used this same black for the shoes and buttons as well. The cravat went through a couple of tests. I tried using the tan color the original had, but it seemed so out of place and unnecessary. It wasn't even working as a sort of statement piece since it was such a neutral and desaturated color. Not to mention it was almost the exact gray tone as the white of the shirt. After trying to use the tan in different ways and trying different levels of darkness for it, I ended up just scrapping it all together. It made more sense to just make the cravat white like the shirt instead. Finally was the hair. Keeping the base color black, I used a darker black for the same reason I made the pants darker. The bright purple on his hair is important to this character's story, so I wanted to keep using it. The purple that was used is one of the most saturated and unnatural purple colors I have ever come across. Although it would not be something that I would choose to ever use in one of my characters, if you like this shade of purple, I could find no real reason to change it besides just personal preference. So I blocked out where the hair would change colors and blended the black and purple together to create a smooth transition between them. Knowing that the hair was dyed, it's important to show that transition between the colors, so that we know that this is where the hair dye is fading and it's not a natural part in his hair. The original also has this second pink color on the bottom of the hair that just seems like way too much. It's totally cool if he dyed his hair to help him stand apart from his siblings. However, knowing this character's personality and what he's all about, it seems completely out of character that he would go for this crazy multicolored gradient in his hair. With all of that, we have this updated look for Edwin. I am a big fan of villain characters, so I would love to see you push this character into being the true villain that he deserves to be. Never be afraid to push yourself out of your comfort zone, especially if it's going to enhance your character designs. You'll never grow as an artist if you never take the jump into trying new skills and techniques. You will never learn to draw hands if you continue to avoid drawing hands for the rest of your life. That brings us to the end of another OC critique video. Hope you all enjoyed this one. I always have a fun time doing this. I also love seeing all the cool and interesting characters that people come up with, especially when it's something that I would never have thought of myself. Everyone has such fun ideas that I love seeing come to life. Remember, if you want to submit your own character in a future critique video, you must join my Discord server to do so. The server is also a really nice and fun place full of other artists who all hang out and share their art. Be sure to click the link in the description to join. While you're down there, you will also find links to my social media. I post a lot of art that you will never see on my YouTube channel, on my Instagram, and on my Twitter. I also have a Patreon where for just a few bucks a month, you can get access to a bunch of my process work and raw files. Thank you all for joining me today. If I talked about your character, I hope I said something helpful. And if I didn't talk about your character, hopefully something I said was helpful to you too. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. All the things that the YouTubers say. Peace!